on stage, I will welcome Kubecka, who will be giving a keynote.
I started pretty young. I was taught programming by my mother, who was a robotics programmer on assembly line manufacturing. Unfortunately, when I was 10 years old, I did a little oopsie and got busted for breaking into the Department of Justice and the FBI. So don't follow in my footsteps. Now, there are a lot of security challenges, both around the world and on the continent. And the problem is, when you've got all these security challenges, it makes it quite easy for cyber criminals and nation state actors. And unfortunately, sometimes some countries actually employ cyber criminals because they may be sanctioned countries. A good example is North Korea, where they still have to make money and get around sanctions. And so they employ different types of malware and ransomware and so forth to bring money into the economy. Now, some of these challenges are even worse when you think that how many things can connect to the internet? How many access points are there, entry and exit points? And typically, the longer a company has been around, the more access points, exit and entry points there probably are. It also means that there are a lot of systems that they just don't know about. I heard about a crucial database system that had been walled in with only the network cable sticking out, and the company found it during a renovation. So these things happen. Now, another issue that we have is security is definitely hard, and it's my personal opinion that a lot of security vendors and tech vendors make it more difficult because it means that you're tied to their technology and you have to do their various vendor-specific certifications in order to deal with the technology. So there is no imperative for many IT and security vendors to actually make security easier for us. Now, we're also grappling with the challenge that more and more things are being connected. We've already expanded the IP version 4 space to IP version 6. We're now being able to leapfrog, especially in places like the Middle East and many parts of Africa, directly to 5G where it's available. And that just means more and more things connected, more and more risk. Another issue is there is not a lot of software development life cycle that goes on with project management. Unfortunately, a lot of project managers do not understand the technology that they're dealing with or understand that they need to think about security as part of the basis of the project plan. And I've heard many horror stories from even software developers going, well, we wanted to test it and we wanted to put in things like patch management and so forth, but project managers said no. Another issue is the lack of opportunity. Security education can be quite expensive and outside the reach of a lot of people around the world. I'll give you a great example. SANS costs about $10,000 a week in person, and that is as much as a car. And you shouldn't have to spend as much as a car for 1 week's worth of education. And security is typically, and unfortunately, a bolt-on action, where if it's not thought of from the beginning with the project plan, if there is a project plan, then boom, let's add security in. And the problem with that is it ends up costing more money when you have to add things in, and usually it is not done very well. Now, the chairman mentioned remote accessibility, especially due to the pandemic. And what that means is, feel free to use this hashtag, BYOH, bring your own house. That means that if you've now been moved from the office where it might have a firewall and all these different other types of security items, you probably don't have it in your house. And you most likely have to share internet connectivity with someone else. It could be your children, it could be your neighbors, if you can even get stable internet. and it might not be that safe. Now, that also means that there's going to be increases in exploitable vulnerabilities, because now you've increased that attack surface exponentially. So when it comes to critical national infrastructure, the same thing is occurring. More and more critical national infrastructure, especially during the pandemic, which has accelerated remote capabilities, has caused an absolute nightmare for all of us watching this. But at the same time, it's been a huge moneymaker for cyber criminals, and also a huge opportunity for various nation state actors to gain information and a foothold into various critical national infrastructure around the world, and especially in Africa. I was reading an article that was posted 11 years ago, and I believe it was Bloomberg that said that if Africa did not start catching up to basic cybersecurity, there would be enough exploitable vulnerabilities that could knock out entire energy grids. And unfortunately, that situation has not drastically changed both on the continent or around the world. Typically, this is because privately owned companies, they're looking at their bottom line. Can they pay their executives a bonus, their management a bonus? And how much money do they need to actually devote to security? And can they see the value in doing so? Because a lot of executives, they see security as this black hole where money just goes in and there's no return. But I think we all know that when we lock our houses, doors, windows, etc., there's a return of investment for doing these items, because that means that it's less likely that somebody can break in. And even if they try to break in, hopefully someone will be able to catch them. So there needs to be a change in the way that a lot of executives think, where security actually minimizes risk and does have return on investment. Because I think everyone is tired of data breaches or ransomware or financial related types of crimes and regular everyday scams. Now, this particular graph was taken looking at post-COVID for the amount of systems around the world by the top 10 countries, and looking at A, the number of systems connected to the internet that say hello, and B, in the lower graph, is the number of those systems which have known remote access vulnerabilities which can be exploited. And as we see, South Africa, which is on the continent, is number 10 on the list, but it has a significant amount of vulnerabilities versus the amount of systems online. Now, I do want to assure everyone listening that everyone is vulnerable. Given enough time and effort, and also multiplied by the amount of systems online, there is going to be some case where there is an open hole that a group can use to get into these things. And this can be scary because, again, private companies and many times governmental agencies don't have very many requirements to actually be secure. Private companies lack regulation, and government agencies typically do not want to reveal that they have had any sort of issues, even though government agencies are typically supposed to be owned by the country's citizens. And this is very unfortunate. Now, some of the things that can happen is there are some actors, whether they are cyber criminals or they are nation states, or whether they just do it for the lulz and like chaos, try to destabilize different things. They could also do it for economic purposes, to try to lower a stock value or affect a company's market value and then do a hostile takeover. A lot of these cases, it really relates to either money or information. But usually that information, even when a nation state does these types of things, is related to allowing those countries to gain an economic advantage. There's also been some unfortunate cases of terrorist groups which have gone out and used different types of malware and different types of attacks to actually gain access and use it as an extortion method. I've been involved in one particular case where an embassy was hacked by an insider with a lot of access, and that particular insider was working with a terrorist group called ISIS. And that terrorist group threatened to kill over 400 people if we didn't pay them $50 million. Now imagine that. And these things keep going and going because if they can't do physical crimes, especially during the pandemic, they're shifting over to digital crimes because it's cheaper and easier. And if they don't have the skills to do these types of attacks, we've also seen that in India, the terrorist group ISIS actually put ads in some of these smaller papers saying, hey, work for us, we'll pay you to be a hacker. And it was open and blatant. And the newspaper companies actually ran the ads without looking at them and approved them. So we've got a lot of challenges. And when you find something, you run into, is this legal to actually report? Will I get sued? Will I get arrested? I was in this particular situation when it came to Boeing. I was able to ethically and legally, under Dutch law, hack into Boeing's infrastructure, get into their research and development, their aviation ID system, which is a system that actually technicians use to update aircraft. And Boeing tried some naughty things. And in the end, the United States government stepped in and told Boeing that they had to fix their stuff. And Boeing subsequently set up a vulnerability disclosure program based on my 60-page report or 56-page report, something like that. There were a lot of things wrong with them. But sometimes if you see something and you want to say something, one of the best avenues that you can use is a national level computer emergency response team. And that way it shields you in many cases from arrest or a lawsuit. Now, one of the challenges that the African continent has in particular is a lack of opportunity. And I say this because it certainly isn't a lack of people who want to be in this field. On the contrary, this is a field that can empower people. I remember when I was growing up and we had very little money, and I was determined to never return to that state. And when I saw that the digital world could grant me that opportunity, it was fantastic. And nowadays, in some countries, a person in cybersecurity who has a good background, applicable knowledge, and certain types of certifications can make more than a medical doctor. So the opportunity is there. However, the opportunities within the continent are very difficult. Think about what it costs to set up your own company in your country, all the licensing fees, all the additional fees, things you didn't even think of, legal fees, etc., etc. And there's also another challenge, and this is around the world, but especially in some areas of the world, like parts of the African continent, where education is just not tech focused enough. And part of this problem is driven by the fact that internet infrastructure around parts of the continent of Africa just aren't there. I remember years ago, the last time I was in Tanzania, I was handling an investigation with an exploration company, and they were hacked by the Chinese government. And the only reason why they didn't lose all their data was because their internet connection was so slow, the exploration data could not actually leave their network. So it was good for this particular type of attack, but bad because it posed so many challenges and it was so absolutely frustrated. This company and everyday people just did not have good enough internet to be part of the digital world 100%. And this is one of the things that needs to be addressed, as well as getting more tech-focused education starting from very early on. The ability to use tablets, smartphones, computers, and the availability of these things. And unfortunately, some of the challenges with this and the infrastructure for the internet and tech-focused education is also driven by lack of stable electricity. And you can't have a computer thinking that it's going to work when you're stuck with generator power filling in for the hours that the electric company cannot provide. Another one that I absolutely hate, and I mentioned this in the opening, is the cost of tech certifications. Now, most of the tech certifications are driven from the Western world, and there's only a handful of certification tests, exams, and training that actually are not vendor specific and don't cost a huge amount of money. And when I hear many of these big, like top four various consulting and accounting firms saying and issuing reports, well, there's a skills gap, there's not enough people in cybersecurity. Well, there's two great reasons for that. It isn't really so much a skills shortage as it is the fact that it costs so much in many cases to enter the field. And also, human resources does not help when they list that you must have 25 different certifications to apply for an entry-level job. Another issue is there's a lack of digitization policy and vision plans in many countries in Africa. Now, if we look at UAE, for example, they have vision plans of 2030 and 2050, where it says that they want all government services to be online and for you to be able to have a digital ID to be able to conduct business. They say it'll improve healthcare, it'll decrease the amount of bureaucracy and red tape, but underneath some of that is it will also decrease corruption. Now, I want to stress, corruption is everywhere. I live in the Netherlands, and we have corruption all over the place. However, it just seems more hidden and more accepted in certain areas in the West. But this is something that the cost of setup of your business, if you haven't done so already, you're going to run into some of these things. And digitization plans cuts down on that ability for someone to ask for a bribe, for example. All you have to do instead is sign in with their digital ID and go through the process without interacting with a human being. So there are many things that much of the continent can do, but right now there is not enough planning. And I do stress there needs to be more planning. Now, some of the deterrents to your everyday cyber criminals, to cyber gangs, which are very well formed because they see so much money in it, and also nation state attackers looking to get a foothold into critical national infrastructure, is actively looking at what exposure you or your organization has. And I'm a big proponent of active defense. So instead of waiting for the house to burn down, put a smoke alarm in it. And make sure you put that smoke alarm in areas that would be at higher risk of fire. And there are many low-cost, no-cost tools that you can do this with. Now, one of the tools that I use a lot is called Census, CENSYS.io. They do have a free service where you can look up your domain information and see if there's any gaping holes that are in it. Another one that you can use, which is for free, is called Canary Tokens, where it's got about 25 different options where it can produce a fake Word document or Excel spreadsheet or PDF or fake URL for a website. And these things are built so that there is no legitimate reason why anybody would be looking into those documents or URLs, etc. And the moment that someone does, then suddenly you get an alert that says somebody accessed an area that they should not. And then you know, is it malware or is it somebody already in your network or in your computer system? Because you can also put it on your computer system. And then you can actually take action. Providing the opportunities that many African countries currently are lacking. And I do stress this is so important. Another issue is how to responsibly disclose if you find issues within critical national infrastructure, for example, and where to disclose to make sure that you're protected, because you do not want the police knocking at your door. We've also found that regional approaches are better because there are typically shared goals and, to a certain extent, a certain level of shared culture. And it's unfortunate that the world can't come together for everything. There still is no international consensus on cyber warfare, for example. But regionally, this has been actually much more successful. And another thing is, and this is something that really is a bit of a pet peeve, is the fact that lack of various different types of opportunities within certain areas of the world cause a lot of brain drain. And we've seen this even in the Western world from Eastern Europe into the West. And what happens is suddenly doctors can make more money over in the West, or cybersecurity people can make more money in the West. And then we're trying to get different opportunities. But that leaves the home country dependent on those who gain those opportunities, and leaves them lacking the people that they need to plan properly and so forth. So if enough opportunity is put into national level policy in many parts of Africa, hopefully this brain drain and people having to leave their families, their home, their culture, their language, etc., will be reduced. Something to consider, because one of the things that we need to ensure is that no country or region or continent is left behind in the digital world. So I wanted to thank Gilbert and the conference. If you want to check out how to do active deterrence, my last book, Hack the World with Open Source Intelligence Gathering, will help you with that. And it uses the free version of Census, because I believe that you should be able to use low-cost, no-cost tools. And if you want to learn about web application hacking, there's another book, and also that uses free tools as well. So there's no more excuse for an organization saying that they don't have the budget to give security tools to their security staff. And if you would like to get in touch with me or know more, my profile is on the Middle East Institute's website, listed in the URL there.